My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye, slid a stack of bank statements across the table, and calmly announced that I had stolen $28,000 from my own granddaughter. Before I could even process the accusation, she placed another document beside it and said that if I signed it, the family would quietly forgive me. My son never questioned where those papers came from. He only stared at me as though he had already decided I was guilty. Then I noticed something so small that no one else at that table bothered to see, and in that instant I realized this accusation had been planned long before dinner was served. I said nothing. I folded the papers once, slipped them into my purse, and watched my daughter-in-law smile with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. She mistook my silence for surrender. She had no idea that the one detail she overlooked would eventually unravel every lie she had spent months building. Looking back now, I understand that the dinner itself was never the real trap. The trap had been carefully prepared long before that evening, hidden behind kindness, helpful smiles, and offers to make my life easier after my husband passed away. I simply hadn't recognized it until the moment she accused me of something I had never done. 3 months earlier, I would have laughed if anyone had told me that the woman bringing homemade soup to my front porch would one day convince my own son to doubt me. After my husband Thomas passed away, the quiet inside my house became heavier than I expected, and Madison always seemed to appear at exactly the right moment. She offered to organize my paperwork, update my online banking, and help me sort through years of documents that I had been avoiding. She insisted that technology had changed so much that it was safer if she handled everything for me. I remember thanking her for her patience more than once. Looking back now, every favor came with a small request. She wanted a spare key in case of emergencies. She wanted copies of important records in case I misplaced them. She wanted to photograph my insurance policies and financial files so everything would be backed up. None of it sounded unreasonable. Daniel even smiled and told me how lucky he felt that his wife cared so much about me. I wanted to believe him because that was far easier than questioning someone I had welcomed into my family. I did not realize that trust can disappear one harmless favor at a time until there is almost nothing left to protect. The changes were so ordinary that I almost blamed myself for noticing them. One afternoon I could not find the folder where I always kept my property tax records. 2 days later it appeared neatly placed on my kitchen table, and Madison smiled as if she had rescued me from my own forgetfulness. Another week passed, and I tried to log into my online bank account, but my password no longer worked. Madison gently suggested that perhaps I had changed it and forgotten. Daniel laughed softly and said that everyone became absent-minded from time to time. I laughed with him because I wanted the conversation to end. Soon little moments began piling on top of one another. A utility bill never arrived. An appointment disappeared from my calendar. Madison casually asked how much my house might be worth in the current market, and whether I had ever considered moving somewhere with less responsibility. Every question sounded practical on its own, yet together they left an uneasy feeling that I could not explain. The first time I truly became frightened was when Daniel asked if I had thought about letting someone else manage my finances for a while. I had never discussed that with him, which meant someone else already had. The dinner invitation arrived the following weekend, and nothing about it seemed unusual. Madison said she wanted the whole family together, because Sophie had done well in school and deserved a celebration. I even baked the apple pie that Daniel always loved as a little boy. For the first half hour, everything felt normal. We laughed, we shared stories, and I almost convinced myself that the uneasy feeling I had carried for weeks had simply been grief playing tricks on my mind. Then Madison quietly stood, disappeared into the next room, and returned holding a neat folder. The conversation stopped before she even spoke. She placed the papers in front of me with careful hands, as though she had rehearsed every movement. Her voice never rose. She calmly claimed that $28,000 had disappeared from Sophie's college fund, and that every record pointed directly to me. Before I could respond, she produced another document and explained that signing it would spare everyone the embarrassment of involving the bank. Daniel slowly pushed the paper closer to my side of the table without saying a single word in my defense. As my eyes moved across the page, one tiny mistake caught my attention, and suddenly I understood that this was never about missing money at all. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply folded the papers, thanked Madison for the meal, and walked out before anyone could mistake my dignity for desperation. During the drive home, I kept thinking about the document she wanted me to sign. It was not the accusation that bothered me most. It was the signature line. Whoever prepared that page had written my middle name incorrectly. Every legal document I had signed during my 43 years of marriage listed my full name exactly the same way because Thomas had always insisted that details mattered. Madison had copied information from somewhere, but not from the original records. When I unlocked my front door, the house felt strangely different. I went straight to the small cabinet in my study where Thomas kept our most important papers. The folders looked perfectly organized, yet one large envelope had been placed back upside down. Thomas would never have done that, and neither would I. My heart sank as I opened it. Nothing appeared to be missing, but someone had definitely searched through those files. Instead of calling Daniel, I picked up my telephone and called the only person I trusted to separate facts from emotions. Claire Bennett answered before the second ring, and after hearing only a few sentences, she quietly said, "Do not touch another document until I get there." Claire arrived carrying nothing more than a legal pad, a reading lamp, and the kind of calm that only comes from decades of seeing people hide the truth behind polished smiles. She never asked whether I was innocent because she already knew that was the wrong question. Instead, she asked who had access to my house, my records, my computer, and my bank accounts during the past 6 months. As I answered, a pattern slowly appeared that I had been too close to recognize. Every important change had happened after Madison offered to help. Claire instructed me to contact the bank before sunrise and freeze every online credential connected to my accounts. She also told me to request a complete record of every device that had accessed my banking profile. Before leaving, she suggested replacing every lock and collecting every spare key without warning anyone. 2 days later, the first report arrived from the bank. It showed that several recent account sessions had originated from a device that had never belonged to me. The dates matched the exact weeks when Madison had insisted on organizing my paperwork. Claire quietly placed the report on the table, looked directly at me and said, "Now we stop guessing. From this moment forward, we only follow evidence." Sophie came to see me 3 afternoons later while Daniel was still at work and Madison believed I was sitting alone, frightened by everything that had happened. My granddaughter stood on my front porch twisting the strap of her backpack with both hands, and before I could ask why she was there, she quietly said that she needed to tell me something she should have mentioned weeks earlier. She admitted that her mother had asked her unusual questions about my memory, whether I ever forgot conversations, misplaced important papers, or seemed confused after family dinners. At the time, Sophie believed those questions came from concern. Then she remembered something else. On the afternoon Madison helped organize my study, Sophie had returned to pick up a sweater she had left behind. She saw her mother using my computer even though I was outside watering flowers. Madison quickly closed the screen and smiled as though nothing had happened. Sophie never thought it mattered until now. She also remembered hearing her mother say over the telephone that once everyone believed I could no longer manage my finances, everything else would become much easier. Claire listened without interrupting, wrote down every detail, and reminded both of us that memories alone were not enough. We still needed proof that could not be explained away. Madison called Daniel the very next morning and suggested that the family meet with an attorney so everyone could settle the situation before it became more embarrassing. Daniel left me a voicemail saying he hoped we could resolve everything peacefully, as though the truth were simply a matter of opinion. I returned his call and calmly agreed to attend. I even apologized for any stress he might be feeling. That was exactly what Madison expected to hear. She believed I had accepted defeat. What she did not know was that Claire had already instructed the bank to preserve every digital record connected to the disputed transactions. Another report arrived that afternoon. It showed the account had been accessed through a device registered with a security authentication that had never been connected to my telephone. The access logs also matched dates when Madison had visited my home without Daniel. Claire smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. She said we finally had evidence that did not depend on memory, opinion, or family loyalty. We organized every document in chronological order and placed each report inside a plain folder. I slept better that night than I had in weeks because I knew I was no longer walking into a family meeting alone. This time, the facts would be sitting beside me, and facts are far more difficult to silence than frightened people. The conference room was almost silent when I walked in with Claire beside me. Madison greeted us with the same confident smile she had worn at the dinner table, while Daniel looked exhausted from carrying questions he had been afraid to ask. A representative from the bank sat across from us with a thin folder resting on the polished wood. Madison began speaking first, describing her concern for my well-being and explaining that she only wanted to protect the family. I waited until every word had been said before opening my own folder. Claire handed the bank representative the access logs, the authentication records, and the timeline that matched every disputed transaction with visits Madison had made to my home. No one interrupted. The room grew quieter with every page that changed hands. Daniel slowly turned toward his wife as the evidence removed every excuse he had been holding onto. Madison searched for another explanation, but facts leave very little room for imagination. The missing money was traced, my accounts were secured, and every accusation against me quietly collapsed under the weight of documented proof. Before leaving, I looked at my son and told him that trust is not destroyed in a single afternoon. It disappears one choice at a time, and rebuilding it requires exactly the same patience. I walked out with my dignity intact, knowing that the truth had protected far more than my name. It had protected the life that my husband and I had spent decades building together.